I thought I'd found the love of my life until I spotted the tattoo on her shoulder. A faded date, and these mysterious initials, J.L., that she was desperately trying to hide. Every step toward the truth just pulled me deeper into lies and danger. My name's Ethan Carter. I'm 29, and I live in Portland, Oregon, a city where reign's basically a lifestyle and coffee shops are like a second home. I'm a graphic designer at a small studio called Spark Vibe, where we whip up logos and branding for startups dreaming of hitting it big in Silicon Valley. My job's this mix of creativity and grind. I sketch, I chug way too much coffee, and sometimes I forget what a weekend even is. My apartment's an old brick loft in the Pearl District, stuffed with art books, sketches, and a couple of guitars I only play when nostalgia for my teenage years kicks in. My shelves are practically collapsing under the weight of comics I've been collecting since high school, and there's a coffee maker in the corner that's basically keeping me alive. Life's simple. Morning runs along the Willamette River, where the gray sky mirrors the water, evenings with friends at bars serving craft beer, and endless attempts to find some meaning in this chaotic world. I grew up in a Seattle suburb, in a family where everything ran like clockwork. My dad, an engineer, always taught me to break problems down like they were machines. My mom, a literature teacher, got me hooked on stories, though I preferred drawing them to writing them. As a kid, I dreamed of being a comic book artist, creating heroes in capes with complicated backstories who saved the world from evil. I'd spend hours in my room, sketching superheroes with dramatic fates, but reality turned out to be less glamorous. I'm a decent designer, not a genius. I love my job, but it's not my whole life. I've always been more of an observer than an adventurer. My friends used to joke that I was too normal for Portland, with its hipsters, tattoos, and quirky cafes. But I liked my predictable life, until that summer when everything changed. Before Claire, my relationships were few and far between. I'm not the type to fall in love easily. My last relationship ended 2 years ago when my ex, Sarah, moved to New York for a new life. She left me a note thanking me for everything, but asking me not to call. I didn't blame her, but loneliness became a familiar companion. I'd spend evenings drawing or rewatching old movies, convincing myself I was fine with it. I wasn't looking for love, wasn't expecting it. But as it turned out, love found me. And with it came a storm that flipped everything I believed in upside down. I wasn't ready for love to be not just light, but a shadow, hiding danger. July in Portland is when the city comes alive. The music festival at Tom McCall Park was one of those events I went to more out of habit than excitement. My friends Mike and Emma insisted I crawl out of my cave. They always teased me about my love for solitude, and I went along just to avoid an argument. The park was packed. The smell of street food, tacos, and freshly brewed coffee, mixed with guitar riffs and laughter. The stage's colorful lights reflected on the Willamette River, making it feel like the city was dancing. I wandered through the crowd, feeling a bit out of place, holding a plastic cup of beer that had already gone warm. That's when I saw her. She was dancing to some indie band, the singer crooning about broken hearts and lost dreams. Her movements were free, almost hypnotic, like she was part of the music. Long dark hair fell over her shoulders, her denim jacket with patches swayed slightly, and her scuffed sneakers tapped the grass. She didn't notice the crowd, like the whole world belonged to her alone. There was this energy about her that pulled you in, but also a mystery, like she knew a secret nobody else did. I froze, unable to look away. Something about her made my heart race, even though I didn't know her name. I wasn't planning to talk to her. I'm not the guy who chats up strangers. My life was too orderly for spontaneous moves like that. But fate had other plans. She stopped at a lemonade stand, tucking her hair back, and our eyes met. Her dark green eyes with a slight spark sized me up. She smiled, and I, somehow, found myself next to her, mumbling something incoherent about the music. My voice shook, but she laughed, soft and warm, like we were already friends. She introduced herself, Claire Walker, freelance photographer. Her voice had a slight rasp, like someone who laughs a lot or stays up too late. We got to talking, and time just vanished. We sat on the grass by the river until the stage emptied and the lights dimmed. She told me about abandoned buildings she photographed, how light hits old walls to tell stories. I talked about my comics, my job, how Portland smells like rain and pine. Her laugh was infectious, her gaze like an invitation to another world. I felt everything get brighter, more alive around her. We talked until midnight, until the park went quiet, and only the river kept whispering its secrets. When she scribbled her number on a napkin and handed it to me, I walked home feeling like I'd taken a full breath for the first time in ages. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, replaying her smile, her voice, the moment her fingers brushed mine as she handed me the napkin. I didn't know that evening would kick off a journey that had turned my life upside down. Deep down, I felt Claire wasn't just a random encounter. She was like a meteor, bright and unpredictable, but I didn't see the darkness trailing behind her light. The next few weeks were like scenes from a romantic comedy I never thought I'd star in. Claire stormed into my life like a summer breeze, sweeping away routine and grayness. We met up almost every day. She'd call in the morning to drag me to a new cafe with peeling wallpaper and the best latte in town. Or she'd send photos of sunsets with captions like, "We gotta see this together." We wandered through bookstores, where she flipped through old photography albums while I pretended to know art. We drove out of town in her beat-up pickup to Multnomah Falls, where she shot nature, and I watched her, thinking I'd never been happier. Claire was different. She was like the wind, free, unpredictable, but always warm. She could turn a boring evening into an adventure in a minute. One night, we drove around Portland's empty streets for hours, blasting old rock, Led Zeppelin to Nirvana. We stopped at random diners, ate greasy burgers, and laughed when the waitress mixed up our order. She sang along to Bohemian Rhapsody, waving her arms, and I laughed until I cried, feeling more alive than ever. With her, the world got brighter, like someone cranked the brightness to max. But even in that whirlwind of happiness, I noticed odd things. Claire dodged questions about her past. If I asked about her family or childhood, she'd smoothly change the subject, telling a funny story about a shoot or the time she got stuck in an abandoned house during a storm. Her apartment, where I'd been a couple of times, was a cramped studio filled with film, old cameras, and photography books. But there was nothing personal. No photos with parents, no old friends, not even childhood pictures. I chalked it up to her independent streak. She seemed like someone who lived in the moment, and I didn't want to break that magic. 2 months in, she moved in with me. It was her idea. One day she just showed up with a box of her stuff, saying she wanted to be closer. I was over the moon. My apartment transformed. Her cameras took over shelves, her playlists filled the evenings, her art books littered my desk. She'd fall asleep with a novel on her chest, and I'd gently move it so I wouldn't wake her. Her presence warmed the place, but sometimes I caught her staring blankly, like she wasn't really there. Those moments were fleeting, but they left a chill in my chest, like I was looking at a stranger. One night I woke up and she wasn't in bed. I found her in the kitchen, sitting in the dark with her phone. The screen glowed, but she switched it off the second she saw me. I asked if everything was okay, but she just muttered about not being able to sleep and went back to bed. Her movements were sharp, like someone caught doing something wrong. I stayed in the kitchen, feeling cold creep under my skin. That was the first crack in our perfect world. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was just tired. But a seed of doubt took root, growing like a weed, threatening to choke everything we'd built. I started noticing little things. She'd come home late, smelling like cigarettes, though she didn't smoke. Her phone was always with her, and she'd flinch when it rang. Once as I saw her delete a message before I could get close. I didn't want to be paranoid, but her behavior was changing, and I couldn't ignore it. Love still tied us together, but a shadow I couldn't quite see was creeping closer. The tattoo came into my life by chance, but it changed everything. It was one morning when Claire was in the shower. I went into the bathroom for my razor and froze. On her left shoulder, under her pale skin, was a tattoo. A date, March 12th, 2018, and the initials JL. The black ink had faded, but the design was sharp, like it was carved with precision. Something about it made my heart tighten. It wasn't just a tattoo, it was a mark, a secret she carried on her skin. Her body, usually so familiar, suddenly felt foreign, like I was staring at a map to an unknown place. Over dinner, I worked up the courage to ask. We were at the table, she was chopping salad, and I casually mentioned the tattoo. Her hand froze, her fork clinked against the plate. She looked at me, and for a split second, her eyes flashed with something like fear. She brushed it off, muttering that it was just a dumb thing from her youth, no big deal. But her voice was tight, like a string about to snap. I didn't push, but her reaction stuck with me like a splinter. She was lying, and I could feel it in my bones. From that night on, I noticed more. She started locking her laptop, something she never used to do. She'd step out onto the balcony to take calls, speaking so softly I couldn't catch a word. Sometimes she'd come home late, reeking of smoke, though I knew she didn't smoke. I'd ask where she'd been, but her answers were vague. Shoot ran late, or met with a client. Her eyes avoided mine, and it cut like a knife. I wanted to trust her, but the doubts were growing, spreading like dark stains on white cloth. One day I found an old notebook in her bag. It was filled with addresses of abandoned places she photographed. Old factories, deserted schools, empty warehouses. One address was circled in red, a warehouse on the outskirts of Portland, in an industrial area where nobody lived. I didn't know why it caught my eye, but my gut screamed it wasn't just another shoot location. I slipped the notebook back, but the address burned into my memory, like Claire's tattoo. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and one wrong move could ruin everything. I started recalling other details, like how she flinched once when we passed an old building downtown, or how she clammed up when I asked where she grew up. Her life before me was like a book with pages torn out, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what was on them. But the tattoo haunted me. Who was JL? Why was she so scared to talk about it? I felt my love for her mixing with something new, fear of what I might uncover. By fall, our life was starting to unravel. I was swamped with a new project at work, an animation for a startup that was supposed to be a big deal. The days dragged, but I'd come home exhausted yet happy, feeling like I was doing something that mattered. Claire, though, was pulling away. She'd come home late, sometimes past midnight, with tired eyes and the faint smell of someone else's perfume. Her clothes reeked of smoke, though she never smoked. I'd ask where she was, but her answers were like smoke too, slipping away, leaving nothing solid. Shoot, friends, work. The words felt empty, like shells with no truth inside. One night changed everything. I woke up at 3 a.m., and she wasn't in bed. I found her in the kitchen, sitting in the dark, her phone glowing. She switched it off the second she saw me, her movement sharp like she'd been caught. I asked what was wrong, but she just mumbled about not sleeping and went back to bed. Her voice was cold, almost unfamiliar. I stayed in the kitchen, feeling the chill sink into me. That was the first real crack in our world. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. While Claire was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. It was locked, but a notification flashed from an unknown number. "You need to tell him. He deserves to know." My blood ran cold. Who was it? What was she hiding? I put the phone back, but the words burned inside me. I felt like a traitor, but also a victim. How could I trust her when she was clearly hiding something? From then on, I noticed everything. How she jumped when her phone rang. How she avoided certain streets when we walked together. How her smile turned forced when I brought up the future. Marriage, kids, plans. I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, that work was just stressing me out. But the tattoo, the messages, her distance, it was all forming a picture I was scared to see. I loved her, but I felt her slipping away, like sand through my fingers. Every night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining what she was hiding. My love for her was battling a growing distrust, and I didn't know which would win. I'm not proud of it, but I started digging. At first, it was innocent, Googling Claire Walker, Portland, photographer. The results were thin. A couple of mentions in local magazines about her photos of abandoned buildings, a few Instagram posts with black and white shots of alleys and sunsets. But nothing personal. No friends. No family. No hint of a past. She was like a ghost who'd appeared from nowhere. It only made me more suspicious. Nobody lives like they have no history. I went further. In a box under the bed, I found her notebook again. The list of abandoned places she photographed. Factories, schools, warehouses. The one circled in red stood out. The warehouse on Portland's outskirts, in a desolate industrial zone with rusty fences and empty streets. I didn't know why it grabbed me, but my gut said the answers were there. That Saturday, while Claire was out on another shoot, I drove to the warehouse. The place looked like a horror movie set. Creaking rusty gates, shattered windows, graffiti on the walls like warnings. I slipped inside, my heart pounding. It was empty, just dust, old crates, and the smell of mold. My flashlight caught broken furniture and scraps of rusted metal. In a corner, under a tarp, I found a box. Inside were photos Claire had taken. Dozens of them. Strangers, dark alleys, weird symbols on walls. But one person kept showing up. A man in his 30s, dark hair, a scar on his cheek. On the back of one photo, written in her handwriting, Jake, March 2018. Jake. JL. My mind spun. The date matched her tattoo. Who was he? Why was she hiding his photos? And why were they stashed here? I took one photo, my heart racing. I knew I'd crossed a line, but I couldn't stop. Back home, I hid the photo in my desk drawer, under a stack of old sketches. Claire came home late, her eyes tired, her smile forced. I tried to act normal, but my thoughts were elsewhere. Jake, the tattoo, the warehouse. It was all pieces of a puzzle I couldn't solve. I felt the truth was close, but it scared me more than I wanted to admit. The next day, I noticed I was being followed. On my way to work, a dark sedan crept by, its tinted windows hiding the driver. I couldn't see them, but I felt their eyes on me. That evening, it was there again, parked across from my place, under the shadow of an old oak. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence, but the chill in my chest said otherwise. Someone knew I was digging. I told Mike, my IT friend who always bragged he could find anything online. He laughed at my spy drama, but agreed to help. We searched Jake and the date March 12, 2018, adding Portland. The results made my blood run cold. In March 2018, a journalist named Jake Lawrence went missing. He'd been investigating an underground network dealing in stolen art. His case was closed. His body never found. One article mentioned a woman who helped him, but her name wasn't given. The photo of Jake matched the one from the warehouse. Same scar on his cheek. Claire knew Jake. The tattoo, the photos, her secrecy. It all pointed to her being tied to his disappearance. I didn't want to believe she was involved in anything dark, but the facts were stacking against her. I started replaying moments. How she flinched at phone calls, how she avoided certain places. Her past was a shadow following her, and now it was looming over me. I couldn't look at her without thinking of Jake. Every look, every word, felt like part of a mask. But I didn't know how to confront her. If I asked, she might vanish. If I stayed quiet, the shadow would grow. I felt like I was standing on a ledge, and any choice would send me falling. I noticed Claire changing. She got quieter, her movements sharper, like she was waiting for a blow. One day I found a scrap of paper in her jacket with a phone number and the word soon. I didn't know what it meant, but it fueled my anxiety. I felt time slipping away, and if I didn't find the truth, it'd swallow us both. I couldn't stay silent anymore. That evening, when Claire got home, I was waiting in the living room. Jake's photo lay on the table like a silent accusation. She froze when she saw it. Her face went pale, her eyes filled with a fear she couldn't hide. I asked who he was. My voice shook, but I tried to stay steady. I wanted the truth, even if it destroyed me. She tried to brush it off, muttering it wasn't important, but I didn't back down. For the first time, I saw her mask crack. She sat down, head bowed, and started talking. Jake was her fiancé. They were together when he started investigating stolen art. She helped him gather info, not knowing how dangerous it was. When he vanished, she blamed herself. The tattoo was her way of remembering him, carrying the guilt. She'd changed cities, jobs, her whole life to escape her past. Her words sounded sincere, but something didn't add up. Why hide it from me? And who was following us? I asked, but she went quiet, her hands shaking. I knew she was still holding something back. Her gaze was full of pain, but there was a hint of a lie in it too. I went to sleep on the couch, feeling love and distrust battling inside me. I wanted to believe her, but her story was like a puzzle missing pieces. I couldn't shake the feeling she was playing a role, and I was just part of her stage. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. Stop digging, or she'll disappear like he did. My hands shook as I held the scrap of paper. The words were handwritten, the ink slightly smudged, like the writer was in a rush. Someone knew I was searching for the truth. I showed Claire the note, but she just shook her head, muttering it was a mistake. Her fear was real, but I couldn't tell if she was scared of her past or of me. I wanted to go to the police, but Mike talked me out of it. He said they'd laugh me off without proof. Instead, he found an encrypted file on an old forum tied to Jake's case. After hours of work, he cracked it. Inside was a conversation mentioning Claire, not as a victim, but as an accomplice. She'd fed Jake false info that led him into a trap. My world collapsed. The Claire I loved might have been involved in his death. I felt the ground slip out from under me. How could I live with her, not knowing who she really was? I came home ready for another confrontation, but Claire was gone. Her things were missing. Cameras, clothes, books, gone. Like she'd never been there. On the table was a note. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't want you to get hurt. Her handwriting was shaky, like she'd written it in a hurry. I felt love, fear, and anger collide inside me. She'd run, leaving me with questions and emptiness. I didn't know who she was, victim, liar, or something else. But I knew I had to find her, even if it destroyed me. I couldn't let it go. The warehouse address from her notebook was my only lead, but now I knew Claire wasn't just running from her past. The messages Mike found painted her as a player in a dangerous game. I started doubting everything. Her tears, her smile, our love. But part of me still clung to the hope she wasn't what she seemed. I decided to go back to the warehouse, but first I needed more information. I asked Mike to dig deeper. He found an old forum discussing Jake Lawrence's case. Among the anonymous posts, one mentioned a woman called Kay, possibly Claire's alias. She was a go-between for Jake and someone called the Collector, the mastermind behind the stolen art network. The post hinted Kay was working undercover, but her motives were murky. Was she on Jake's side or using him? I didn't know, but it only fueled my need to find the truth. I started tracking her old routes. Claire often talked about abandoned places she photographed, so I checked another spot from her notebook, an old factory on the north side of town. I went there during the day. The factory was half collapsed, with a caved-in roof and shattered windows. Inside, I found signs of recent activity: an empty coffee cup, a cigarette butt, a scrap of paper with a phone number. It was the same number from her jacket. A chill ran through me. Someone had been here. Maybe Claire. Back home, I noticed my apartment felt off. Desk drawers were slightly open. Books on the shelf shifted. Someone had been here. I checked the drawer where I kept Jake's photo. It was gone. My fear turned to anger. Claire, or someone else, was watching me, and I was caught in a game I didn't understand. I decided the only way out was to find her and make her talk. The next day, I saw the dark sedan again. It followed me to work, keeping its distance but not hiding. I sped up, ducking into an alley, but it vanished. My paranoia was growing daily. I started noticing things: a stranger in a coffee shop staring too long, footsteps behind me when I walked home. I felt watched, but I didn't know by whom. I met Mike at a bar to figure out next steps. He brought a printout of another conversation he'd found on the dark web. It mentioned Kay as a double agent, working for both Jake and the collector. She'd fed Jake fake info to protect him, but it backfired. The collector was still after her, thinking she'd stolen something valuable. Maybe not just art, but data or an artifact. Mike suggested it could be bigger than we thought. That night, walking home, I saw Claire. She was standing by my building, in the shadows, her hood up. I froze, unsure whether to run to her or away. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, a mix of fear and determination. She bolted before I could get close, but left a note on the steps. "Don't look for me. It's dangerous." I clutched the note, anger and pain warring inside me. She was still playing games. But I couldn't stop. I decided to take a risk. If Claire was in Portland, she might go back to the warehouse. I drove there at night, rain pounding the windshield. Before leaving, I backed up Jake's photo to the cloud, in case someone searched my place again. I felt like I was walking on thin ice, but there was no turning back. At the warehouse, I found traces, fresh footprints in the dust, an empty water bottle. Someone had been here recently. I went deeper inside when I heard voices. It was Claire and a man. I hid behind crates and saw him. Jake. He was alive, with the same scar on his cheek. He was accusing Claire of betraying him, saying she'd set him up to save herself. She argued she'd done it to save him. Their fight was raw, full of pain, but I realized Claire had been working undercover, passing info to protect Jake. But it went wrong. Suddenly the lights went out, and I heard footsteps. Someone else was in the building. I tried to warn Claire, but it was too late. A man in black grabbed her, and I, without thinking, rushed forward. A fight broke out. I took a blow to the head, but I saw Jake pull Claire into the dark. Her scream, full of desperation, was the last thing I heard before blacking out. I woke up in the hospital, head throbbing, a bandage on my temple. The police found me at the warehouse, but Claire and Jake were gone. A tired, gray-haired detective told me Jake Lawrence's case was tied to a major crime network dealing in stolen art and corporate data. Claire was likely an undercover agent, but her role was unclear. Her disappearance meant she'd either fled or been taken. The detective looked at me with pity, but I could see doubt in his eyes. He wasn't sure if he believed me. Months later, I got a letter with no return address. Inside was a photo of Claire, taken somewhere by the sea. She stood on a cliff, her hair blowing in the wind, staring into the distance. On the back, in her handwriting, "I'm safe. Thanks for loving me." I didn't know if I could trust it. Part of me still loved her, but another part hated her for the lies. I felt like a pawn in a game I didn't understand. I tucked the photo in a drawer, but her image haunted me. I moved to a new part of Portland, away from the memories. Life settled back into a routine. Work at Spark Vibe, morning runs, coffee. But I saw the world differently. Claire taught me love could be dangerous, and truth isn't always what it seems. I started drawing comics again, telling stories of people searching for truth in chaos. My heroes were flawed, like me, but they kept going. It was my way of moving on. So, what would you do in my shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments.